The Sticks and Picks Lacrosse play until the whistle segment. Officials are a huge part of the game. Without the officials, the game wouldn't exist. These segments are for lacrosse fans to get a perspective from the officials and how hard it can really be at times during the game to make the right calls, respecting the officials and reminding fans that they are human too. Lacrosse fans, today we have a special guest on with us. Please welcome Ontario lacrosse official Mike Sullivan. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Will.
We're definitely excited to have you on here and kind of talk about your officiating career. I know I've had the privilege of having you as my official, and lacrosse fans are definitely excited to hear these interviews. So we're going to start things off here and kind of find out where you've been an official throughout your career.
Well, to start, first of all, I appreciate you calling it a privilege that you've had me as a referee. I guess that's a good sign to start.
Yeah, I know for sure. It's awesome, and I know you guys don't get enough credit, and especially now being back in the Clarington area coaching the Green Gales, I do see you quite often, whether it's at one of the Junior B games, a Junior A game, or at a senior game. So it's nice to see you still officiating in lacrosse.
Yeah, it's great actually being here in the Durham region. I live in Oshawa, so I'm right in the middle of it between when you take them to Whitby and Clarington, even up to Peterborough and Beaches and West Durham. There's so much lacrosse in this area, from Junior C all the way up to Major. It's a great place to be. So yeah, I love reffing here, and I love all the different levels and different teams we see. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. And you said it there. You live in Oshawa. You're so close to Oshawa or lacrosse in this area is a hotbed, and you have such an opportunity to ref around here. So we'll get started. Which leagues have you been an official in, and where do you currently officiate?
Currently, I officiate just in the OLA. I referee in pretty much every level: Junior A, B, and C, Senior B, Major Series. I've even started. I did a little bit of the Senior C. They started just this past summer, and I referee the Arena Lacrosse League. So pretty much every level except for the NLL. Even all the way down into minor. My son started refereeing a couple years ago, and so 2 summers ago I went and did his first game. I did a couple Tyke House League games even, so all the way from Tyke House League up to Major Series.
That's awesome, and I mean, there's so much variety there. And I remember seeing that social media post of you reffing a game with your son for the first time. So that was obviously pretty special for you and your son.
Yeah, it was great.
And so I got to ask you, why did you become a lacrosse referee?
It's kind of a long, winding story. Years ago, I was working and not really doing much else, and I was looking for something to do in my spare time. And a friend of mine started coaching hockey up in Peterborough, and he talked to me about that and told me about it. But what I was doing for work, my schedule was kind of all over the place, so I couldn't really commit full time. I thought about coaching, but I thought, well, I can't know if it's scheduled. I don't have that specific times I'm available. And for some reason, refereeing occurred to me. So I started refereeing hockey. I did about 3 or 4 years of that. And then I thought, well, now I need something to do in the summer. And originally, actually, I really I played baseball when I was younger and growing up, and I really enjoyed baseball. And I thought I was going to umpire baseball. And then for some reason, I remember friends of mine in school, we used to go watch the Brooklyn Redmen play back in the late 80s and early 90s. All those, all those great teams with, like Johnny Fusco and Tom Reggett and the Gates and Scotty McMichael. I mean, just some great lacrosse players. And I thought, hey, lacrosse is, I've always been interested in that. So I thought I'd give it a try. I signed up to ref lacrosse, and that was in 2004. And so this summer, if hopefully we get some games going, this will be my 17th season as a referee for lacrosse.
Wow, that's incredible, and it's quite the story for sure. Being a big baseball guy growing up and kind of falling in love with the game of lacrosse, and now you give so much back to the game, and you've had so many probably great experiences and probably some that weren't so great. So I got to ask you, what's your favorite part about being a lacrosse official?
I think my favorite part, it kind of sounds easy to say, but just kind of everything, the whole atmosphere around the game. Being on the floor with the players. I mean, refereeing in Ontario are, basically some of the best, most of the best lacrosse players in the world are here. Like I said, I've been refereeing for so long. You think about all the great players that have come up and through the Ontario system, through junior lacrosse and senior lacrosse, and that in the last 10 or 12 years. And, to be out there on the floor with them, be up close and personal and see that action, it's just great. Just going to the rink, the atmosphere, getting there early and seeing the coaches and players, and people you see at the arena saying hi to people and just being around it. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. You said it, the game is so fabulous and it's awesome to be around, but sometimes there are things that aren't so great about the game, and there must be something about you being an official that you don't like so much about the game.
Oh, I think probably like everybody else will say the same thing. The abuse, the when coaches, players, that type of thing, fans, parents. I think the one thing that is kind of the most frustrating to deal with and is the almost unreasonableness of when you're dealing with coaches and players, that they see one thing one way when when their team does something or when something happens to their team, it's and then something almost identical happens, if the other team does something and they want a major penalty and a suspension and the player kicked out of the league and the coach suspended. But if their player does almost the same thing, it shouldn't even be a penalty, so it's the difficulty sometimes of just dealing with that. It just is so far gone that the coaches and players don't see it, that, hey, we're just out there refereeing a game. I don't care who wins or who loses. I have no bias to one team or another. I just want to call a good game and get out of there in one piece. But it's just some unreasonable they can be to seeing the rules.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you made a good point there. You just said all you're trying to do is officiate a good game and you want to get it out of there in one piece. And I mean, sometimes games do get kind of out of control, and it's tough as an official to kind of manage that game and to make the right call at certain times. And of course, not everyone's going to like the call, but at the end of the day, you're the official, and you have to do your best job at all times to make the right call. And I know from my experience having you as an official, you do that at all times, and it is a difficult job, but you do a great job at it. So,
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
no problem. We're going to talk a little bit about your experience. You've been around the game a lot, and you've officiated in a lot of different arenas. Do you have a favorite arena to officiate in? And if so, which one is it and why?
Um, there's a couple that I really enjoy. I think some of the ones, I'd say Mimico is a great rink to go to. It's always, it's not the biggest arena out there, but they get a great crowd in there and they're always really enthusiastic, and you always get a great back bacon sandwich when you go to Mimico. So that's always a good part too. So a place like that, Halton Hills is the same way. Doing a junior B game in Halton Hills can get pretty crazy. So that's always a lot of fun. But I think overall, I think one of my favorites, and unfortunately I don't get a chance to go there that often just based on geography because I'm so far away, is Jack Gatecliff in St. Catharines. I was lucky enough, I got to do the President's Cup in 2015, which was hosted in St. Catharines. So I have some great memories from that. And same thing, it's the old barn, as the cliche is. It's the old wooden rafters and the wooden seats. It's a great old building, lots of atmosphere. So yeah, I think Jack Gatecliff, that might be one of my favorites down in St. Catharines.
Yeah, for sure. And for fans who don't know, Jack Gatecliff used to be the home of the OHL's Niagara Ice Dogs. And for a lacrosse game, it would be a pretty cool atmosphere because the fans are right on top of the players and they're right on top of the officials as well. So you probably feel like you're crammed right in there, but it's definitely a pretty cool arena, that's for sure. We're gonna
Oh yeah, it's
add,
fabulous.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna talk about players. You've obviously officiated against a lot of players too. Are there any players that stick out? Some who are probably the best that you've ever officiated, or who you think some of the best players are that you've seen?
Um, like I said, I mean, you think about all the players that have come through Ontario in the last 10 years or so. There's some fabulous, away from John Grant. Cody Jamieson is great. Some of these young guys coming up, Jeff Teat, and even I was lucky enough. I've been able to do both Sean and Dyson Williams. I think think a lot of people are pretty high. I think Dyson's going to be a pretty special player. But guys like that, one of the ones I really like I said earlier, I really liked baseball when I was younger and kind of coming up. And a couple of the guys that were my favorite players in baseball were like Ken Griffey Jr. was one, and Bo Jackson especially. And I love players that are just great athletes, guys that you look at on the floor playing lacrosse or on the field for baseball, and you can just tell. It just seems like no matter what sport they play, they would have been good at. They could pick up anything and be fabulous at it in a week. And so players like that, I remember I saw Dane Smith when he was playing junior A. I did a game with him, and I thought that of him. I saw him out there one time on the floor and just thought, wow, that kid is just, he's big and strong and fast and just an athlete. Even no matter what sport he played, it seemed like he would be good at. So guys like that, I think, are the players that I really like to watch and to officiate.
Yeah, no, for sure. Dane Smith is one of the NLL's best players right now. And you talked a little bit about Dyson Williams there. Actually, he's coming on the podcast this week. And I have in my notes, he's probably going to be a household name in lacrosse for many years to come. And I think it's pretty cool as an official to get to kind of grow up as a person and kind of watch these young kids flourish into some pretty good lacrosse players. Speaking about your experience again, you've seen a lot of coaches. Do you have any favorite coaches that you like to officiate games with, or have you ever noticed certain coaches that do a really good job on the bench?
I don't know that I have a favorite coach. I liked. There's good and bad on all of them. One coach that I do recall a couple, and for some reason they stick out a few things. Derek Keenan is a coach that I've done quite a bit. I mean, right up through, I remember reffing him when he was coaching in minor in the qualifier program when he was in Whitby. And I remember specifically there was one time, I don't know exactly what the call was, but he obviously didn't agree with it. And he was letting me know that. And I kind of heard it a couple times. And then I turned to the bench and I just kind of, did the old hold my hand up. Okay, coach, that's it. And he instantly stopped. And that kind of got me thinking, that's a good coach. He knew that he wanted to, get something across to me as a ref that he was unhappy with what had happened. He wanted to know that I had heard it. And then as soon as I did that, it was right back to coaching his team. And he wasn't ranting and raving and yelling and screaming and going on. And like some coaches, they just constantly go on and on and on about it. And that I thought was pretty impressive. And then I remember years later when he was coaching junior A, it was the same thing that we were talking about the players and the calling a game and how you call a game, and that it's nobody comes to a lacrosse game to watch a 3-2 game. People come there to watch the offensive players and the skill players, and that's what they want to see. And he was saying that as a referee, it's almost part of our responsibility to make sure we're calling the game in the spirit of the rules that allow those players. We don't let the defensive players just beat up on guys all night long. And I thought that was pretty impressive too, that he thought that through and that he brought that up. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you made a good point about Derek Keenan. He's obviously one of the greatest coaches and GMs in lacrosse of all time. And you made the point of him getting his point across, but when you asked him to stop, he stopped right away. And I think that's a lesson that coaches should learn, is when they want to be heard, they get their point across, but there is a line and you can't cross that. And I think Derek Keenan does a great job at that. We'll go a little bit back to the arenas here. You've officiated a lot. You must have a least favorite arena. And if so, which one is it?
And like we were talking about, with being here in the Durham region, there are so many teams within just, an hour or an hour and a half of where I am, between, Clarington and Peterborough and Whitby and Beaches. Even I go up north, I do, Huntsville, Aurelia, Barrie, Newmarket, that I'm so around here locally. I don't actually ref in a lot of different buildings. It seems like I do about the same 12 or 15 kind of thing over and over and over again. So I don't know that I have a least favorite. I think I would have to say, for just my own personal reasons that are a little selfish, is the pad 1 at the Ajax Community Center. It's so big out there, and I'm getting up a little older. I'm not quite as fast as I used to be. So that, and The arena in Aurelia is actually a beautiful arena. I love going up there. It's so nice. It's this great big huge high ceiling, and it's got natural light with windows coming in. So that's a great building. But that floor, you get out there, and I don't know if it's an optical illusion because of how high the ceiling is, but you get down to one end of the floor, and the goalie at the other end looks like you can barely see him. So that's a huge floor too. So as beautiful as that arena is, sometimes I don't like the size of the floor, but that's just for my own selfish reasons.
Yeah, you talked about that Aurelia Arena. It is a beautiful facility, and that natural light is pretty cool. But I remember playing in my junior days and getting a long bomb breakaway pass. It'd probably go right off my helmet and bounce right out of play because I couldn't see that ball sometimes. And um, yeah, I can see where you're coming from with how difficult it is to see sometimes in that arena. But it is a very nice. It's a nice building, and it's a great place to play an officiate lacrosse game. That's for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about the funniest thing a player or coach has ever said to you during a game. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you or that you remember that made you kind of chuckle on the floor?
I there's been a ton. I don't know that I could really mention some of them here. But I do recall one time it was funny. Actually, it was the Gales. So and it was Jason Crosby was coaching, and the team was kind of notorious sometimes for coming out late onto the floor at the start of the periods. And my partner, I won't mention any names or say anything. He was a little bit newer. He was getting a little excited because the time was running down and the Gales weren't out on the floor, but the coaching staff was on the bench, and we kind of looked at it. The buzzer went, and the team wasn't out on the floor, so I kind of looked over at Jason and just kind of walked over and opened the penalty box door and kind of gave him a nod, and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, we need to work on our man down anyway, so what the heck. And this was one of those. It's unfortunate sometimes the junior games when you get teams that aren't as balanced as other. They were probably already up by 12 or 15 goals anyways, and so he just kind of whatever, who cares. So I thought that was kind of funny. And the other one I remember that was absolutely hilarious, and the terrible thing about it is it was so long ago I don't remember who my partner was, so I can't give him credit for it. But for everybody that I guess most people would know Iroquois Park because of the festival, pad 3 and 4, those two were the benches. There's nothing behind them. And as referees, we just go off right through the bench door, right past the visitors' bench and into our referees' room. And there had been a crease call down at the far end of the floor, and the coach was just going crazy. And as we were walking off the floor at the end of the game, my partner just very quickly and casually just kind of stepped off the floor, hopped up onto the bench, looked down the floor, said, you're right, you can see it better from up here. Hopped down and walked into our referee's room without missing a beat. And I just about killed myself laughing. And like I said, I feel terrible that I forget who it was because it was one of the best lines I've heard in reffing. And the coach kind of gave him a dirty look and just kept walking, and it was great.
Oh, that's certainly awesome. That's a great memory. And I mean, at the end of the day, lacrosse is a game, and you guys are out there trying to do the best job that you guys can possibly do. And it's just those little things sometimes, the humor in the game that kind of makes things a little bit easier on you guys. And from my experience playing with the Green Gales and knowing Jason Crosby a little bit, I can just see him shrugging his shoulders, and I can only imagine how funny that would have been as a lacrosse official to see, okay, whatever, we need to work on our man down anyway. So it's pretty cool to hear a story like that. So we're going to talk about kind of the abuse in the game of lacrosse towards the officials. And if with all your experience, would you have any kind of advice or would you like to see anything change in the game of lacrosse that would help kind of limit the abuse towards the officials, all the abuse that you guys receive?
It's so hard to offer advice because everybody is so different in how they deal with it. Some people take it personally, some people don't. The only thing you can say is you just wish that, especially with newer and younger officials, that they realize that that these are adults talking to sometimes a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, and to put a 14 or 15-year-old kid in a position of authority over an adult is basically what you're doing when you're putting them out there to referee, because they can call penalties, they can throw that coach out if he gets out of hand. So that's a really uncomfortable position, I think, for a lot of the young referees. So just recognizing as an adult that, yeah, you're you have that competitive spirit and you want to win and you're coaching your team, but sometimes you really need to kind of dial it back a little bit and just look at the big picture and think, do I really need to be out here, yelling at a 15-year-old kid? And I remember years ago at a bunch of referees were around talking, and we kind of was, just totally joking about it. But we said, could you imagine a bunch of referees that went to, say a Bantam or midget lacrosse game and yelled at a player the way, a 15 or 14-year-old player, the way that some parents yell at a referee, telling them they're terrible and they're the worst player out there. And, if you did that, there'd be parents over there. The situation would get out of hand pretty quickly, but people feel nothing about saying that to a young referee kind of thing. So just kind of using your head a little bit and thinking of the big picture.
Yeah, exactly. And you touched on it there. There are young officials, and lacrosse is all about growing the sport and trying to make it bigger because it's such an amazing game. And officials are a huge part of the game, and there are a lot of young officials, but a lot of them leave because the abuse that they receive, whether it's from coaches or even fans in the stands. Like I remember I was an official in Nepean Minor, and I had a younger partner, and a parent was kind of getting all over him for no reason at all. It was probably me, to be honest, missing calls. I was probably more ball focused than anything. But anyways, the moral of the story is an adult was basically verbally abusing a young kid, and that kid stopped his lacrosse officiating career, and he probably could have gone on to make some extra cash and still been a young, good official in the game of lacrosse. But it's just, it's sometimes it's sad to see stories like that. And I think you made a good point. People maybe have to take a step back and kind of see that they are yelling at a younger kid. And yes, sometimes a younger kid has authority to maybe kick a coach out or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to ref and officiate the game to the best of their ability. And it's just the way things go sometimes. So it would be nice to see the parents, in my opinion, step back a little bit and just kind of let the players play. You've you've had a lot of partners as well throughout your career. You must have maybe a kind of a favorite guy or a guy you like officiating with to kind of balance your style of officiating out. Is there anyone that comes to mind when I say favorite partner?
I was very, very lucky when, like I said, when I first started reffing, and again, based on geography where I am. And unfortunately, neither of them referee anymore, but I got to ref a lot when I was starting out with both Jason Wiswell and Bill Fox. And I mean, those were, two of the best referees around for the longest time. So the fact that I was lucky enough to get to ref with them, and not just ref, but spend time. I remember Bill and I would drive up to Peterborough or Norwood when the senior B team was there, now in Ennismore, and, just spending a couple hours in the car driving the games, talking about the game and learning stuff like that. So those were two of my favorite. More recent guys, the guys that are reffing currently, I guess I thought about this, you mentioned it, for the same reason, two guys, both Kyle Kennery is a good guy to ref with, and Blair Ferguson. And both of them kind of for the same reason, is they're both really, really laid back. They don't let anything bother them. They got a great sense of humor, and they can break the tension if things are getting out of. I know I'm refereeing with Kyle quite a bit. He'll just, out of nowhere for no reason make some comment right out of the blue that just breaks the tension and stuff. So, he never lets the pressure of the game get to him. And so those are probably two of the guys currently that I really, really enjoy reffing with.
I got to ask you a question about some of those guys that you mentioned. The first one is, could Jason Wiswell run back in the day? I couldn't see him being a lacrosse official today, but I know he had a pretty successful career with it.
I'm going to maybe politely refuse to answer that question. He got where he needed to be. He was in position. I don't know that much. I'm going to even say that about myself. Might not always be in the greatest shape, but we get where we need to be when we need to be there. So I'll say that.
That's that's an awesome answer. And then the second question I do have, Kyle Kennery. I only had him as an official a few times, but I did see him in my junior coaching career a lot more. And one thing I do like a lot about him is how vocal he is as an official. Do you think the communication with players and coaches is something that helps out the game of lacrosse between officials and players and the coaches?
Oh, it is unbelievable. Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the reasons I really like, even at some of the higher levels of junior A and the senior lacrosse, and because you can talk to the players so much. I know we used to kind of joke about it when you were doing a game. If you finish a game reffing and you don't have a sore throat, you've been doing something wrong, because you should be out there yelling and talking, all night long. And they say, you can talk players out of a penalty. Guys on defense, you can kind of talk to them, hey, keep those cross checks down, or keep the slot, watch the stick, do this, don't hold your picks. And you're just constantly talking to the players out on the floor, reffing a game. You can talk to the draw man every time you come out, start a period or after a goal, you're talking to guys there. And so, yeah, communication is really important. I tend to talk to players a lot more than I talk to coaches, which maybe is something I probably should do a little more, because I find coaches, it just slows the game down too much. Coaches want to talk to you, it seems like, after every call sometimes, and you can't explain every possession call or every call you make in a game. But I'll talk to players on the floor, anytime they want, as long as they're talking. That's the other thing we say. As long as they're not yelling at you and calling you names and telling you you're the worst referee they've ever seen and waving their arms around, and then I'll just walk away and won't deal with them. But if they want to talk, they have questions, or they just want to know what's going on, I have all the time in the world to talk to a player like that.
Yeah, exactly. You made a good point there. As long as the players are being respectful and they're just trying to have a conversation, you having a conversation back with them is great, and it's good dialogue between the officials and players. And I do get where you're coming from, being a coach, and I think I've seen it all as a coach, where I've seen coaches yell at calls where I'm looking like, yeah, the ref made the right call, and I'm just looking at the other coaches like, what are they screaming at? Or sometimes they just go crazy for no reason. So, I do understand why you keep your distance, and I don't blame officials at all for doing that. So we're going to go back. You mentioned one of your partners on top of the players bench after a game calling the crease call. Is there another official that comes to mind who has a really good sense of humor to you?
Oh geez, nobody I can think of off the top of my head now. Like I said, I think Kyle and Blair are probably up there as two of the funniest guys that I ref with. Maybe Neil McDonald can be sometimes. A lot of people might not understand what he's saying, but when you do get what he's saying, it can be pretty funny. So he's smart and funny, which is a dangerous combination sometimes.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, Neil was, I like to refer to Neil as kind of like he knows the rule book. So in the back of my head, maybe this sounds bad or not, but he's like a rule book referee, sort of say. And I would kind of ask him a sarcastic question, and he would come back very witty with a legitimate lacrosse answer, and I would just be walking away from that conversation looking like the idiot there. So I do agree with you when you do say Neil McDonald. Sometimes he's got some good one-liners, and they are great at times. So we're going to end it with any crazy stories. Are there any that you like to share? You don't have to if you don't want to, but if there are any stories that look for lacrosse fans that have happened throughout your career that you'd like to share, feel free to.
One of the funnier ones, and I remember this from this goes right back to my very first year of refereeing. Actually, two really quick ones. I clearly remember my very first game that I ever refereed, because it's funny, my wife was actually pregnant at the time and quite late in her pregnancy, and it was the first games I'd been assigned, and I was kind of leery. I didn't want to turn them back because I didn't want to get in the assigner's bad books. The very first games he gave me, I was going to have to turn them back, even though I had a very good reason. And my wife said, "Oh, it's fine. You're only going to be," it was in Newcastle when the Clarington House League played out of the Newcastle Arena. So I thought, okay, I'll be close by. It'll only be for a couple hours. And I went and did my games, and I came home, and my wife was in labor. And we kind of thought, well, the doctor had said, the first time it happens, it's not always, maybe it's false labor, maybe it's not going to happen. So we went to bed, and she woke me up later that night and said, nope, this is it. And we went to the hospital, and the very next day, my son was born. Owen was born in 2004. So I know, because I reffed my first game the night before he was born. And then that same summer, I would have been reffing, was in West Durham. So I was probably doing a rep game, just helping out, somebody out there. And my wife, Tracy, came with Owen, and he would have only been, 2 or 3 months old. And a lady came and sat down beside her, and just your typical conversation that people have with a new parent. They see a baby, asking how old is he? What's his name? Those kinds of things. And then a few minutes into the conversation, she asked my wife also, because the teams were out on the floor, so what team does your son play for? And my wife said, oh, I don't have a son playing. It's my husband refereeing. And my wife said at that time, the conversation just kind of stopped. She was polite about it. She didn't really leave, but she said that was the end of the conversation. And a couple minutes later, she kind of got up and moved down about 3 or 4 seats and didn't say a word to her again for the rest of the night. And I thought that was hilarious. That pretty much sums up the relationship that people have with referees right there.
I mean, it's pretty funny when you think about it and look back at it over the years. But if you really think about it, it sucks that the culture in lacrosse is like that. I mean, officials are just as much as part of the game as players and coaches are, and it's unfortunate sometimes that the things like that do happen. But I mean, to remember reffing your first lacrosse game ever, and the next day your son was born, that's a pretty cool memory. And I'm glad you made it on time to see the birth of your firstborn child. That was a close call, that's for sure. So we appreciate you coming on here, and I'd like to personally thank you for everything that you do for the game of lacrosse. And it's awesome to see you still out there on the floor and reffing so much. And hope to see you out here hopefully this summer, and we'll see you soon, I guess. I hope. It's always nice seeing you out on the floor, and I appreciate you for coming on here and sharing your story with lacrosse fans.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate all you're doing here to try and spread the word of lacrosse and grow the game. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to another Play Until the Whistle segment. A reminder to follow us on our social media pages on Instagram and Twitter at SticksPicksLax and on Facebook at Sticks and Picks Lacrosse. If you are looking for some new lacrosse equipment, check out our amazing sponsors True Lacrosse or lacrosseunlimited.com. Don't forget that the Global Lacrosse Summit is taking place virtually from May 19th to 30th. Over 50 lacrosse experts will be talking about all aspects of the creator's game. It is free, but there are limited spots available. We are proud sponsors of the 2020 Global Lacrosse Summit. Stay tuned to our social media pages for next week's episodes. We have some awesome guests who came on to join us and talk all things lacrosse.